I am going to introduce Dr. Carolyn Kreiter-Foronda. She was Virginia Poet Laureate Emerita from 2006 to 2008. She has co-edited 4 anthologies and published 10 poetry books, unless she has another new one I don't know about last week, including The Embrace, winner of Art in Literature, the Mary Lynn Kotz Award. Her poems appear in numerous journals, and I won't go through them all, but she's won dozens and dozens of awards. While serving as Poet Laureate, Carolyn started the Poetry Book Giveaway Project and added the Poet Spotlight to her webpage, highlighting one poet from the Commonwealth each month, in addition to traveling all over the state to promote poetry in every corner of Virginia. So I'm delighted to introduce my good friend, Carolyn Kreiter-Foronda. Thank you.
And thank you, Kathleen. You do so much for poets, and I'm just deeply grateful. During my 31 years of living in Northern Virginia, I did volunteer work in nursing homes, as well as in Mitch Schneider's homeless shelter at 2nd and D Streets in Washington, D.C. Many residents there suffer from emotional instability. Here's a poem that addresses this issue. I don't know why I wake up angry at the young for pushing their mothers and fathers into nursing homes, for letting them die hunched over, penniless. I sometimes walk by asylums repeating care, care. Lately, I've let the blind keep the lilies I paint, pounded clay into fist, struggled to understand the slurred speech of stroke victims. I have pushed air into a woman's diseased lungs so she could praise the prism she held in her hands. I have run a blind woman's fingers over Michelangelo's David so she would know he is thinking of enemies, how to escape. On her deathbed, mother whispered barely audible strains, echoed this morning in the rain's breath, and years ago in winds over the burial ground. Care, care, she spoke into a mirror, knowing the face that stared back would wrinkle and offend. Last night at 2nd and D, I read poetry to the homeless, watched ladies from St. Elizabeth's falter. Mindless, they drifted. They pretended to plant seeds, then knelt in their own bleak shadows to pray and pray for miracles. Now, in nursing homes, I've worked with residents, excuse me, who were blind and others who had other problems. They were either deaf or dealing with personal issues. This poem is entitled Touch. The boy in the room does not hear the Meistersinger, though the rhythm of the woodwinds touches an old woman knitting next to him. Her fingers move deliriously, each lute catching the air. Briskness everywhere, she marvels, but the child does not take her words in. Perhaps he is in an open field where music as a wind dance surrounds his body. He stares so calmly into air's fullness. The master singers take their leave, but the woman does not notice the needle lift from the record or see the late afternoon sun weave its warmth along her arms. She is accustomed to darkness, to the touch of a child's hand, constant and assured, wiping this stillness away. Now, I'm also an artist, and I figured out a way to wipe any problems I might have away. Dipping my brush into black, I see no victims, no rehab centers for exploited youth. I hear no children crying, their love abused by strangers in darkened rooms. I stare long into white until girls become clouds racing out of troubled skies. When I swirl my brush through yellow, they become incandescent sun. There is no suffering in the studio, no suffering in Beryl Blue Lake, where mistreated girls swim again seaweed wrapping their limbs in jeweled green. In the studio, black becomes onyx, sable, a magnificent ebony horse. I hoist a lavender flag over the girls, the lake, the stallion on the shore, over all that blooms out of the wilderness of myself. What happened was I started off as a pianist, and that wasn't enough creativity for me, so I moved to my poetry. I also worked for the afternoon newspaper in Richmond, but then I finally got to poetry and kept it to myself for years until I felt comfortable enough opening up. Now, sometimes we look at such things as panhandling with disdain, that is begging in a street. Let me offer another look at this practice. As many of you know, my husband and I have made numerous trips to South America, to his country. But before I met him, I spent time in Peru, among the ruins of Pucapacara, Peru. All afternoon, she follows us around the grounds of Pucapacara, the shepherdess who dances when I give her a fountain pen for school. A gracious present, the young girls smile, her alpacas grazing on tufts of ichu grass. Where she wanders, the red fortress glistens. Stone terraces brighten her wavering shadow. Blue, the color of air, so pure in these mountains that silver does not tarnish, nor do the reds, yellows, greens of her gathered skirt lose their shine in the azure light. I want to remember this child scurrying over slopes, her bare feet soiled with dust. I want to remember her, por favor, señorita, as she begged for my pen. She has been schooled well in the craft of panhandling, a child who now gazes at her mother for approval. Now, I love Luisa's, mention of the importance of paying attention to the environment during these days, and I can't wait to see the book and buy the book. The recent heat wave, as well as the one in the Northwest in 2021, are obvious examples of global warming. And here's a poem that addresses this issue. Historic heat wave 2021. How can the Northwest heat up like this? Intense drought, heat waves pushing warm to the ground, Earth's frailty, or humans' inattention? Wake up to the truth behind record-setting temperatures. 116 degrees in Portland, 108 in Seattle. Ridges of high pressure driven by heat domes sprawl through cities. Streets rumble and crack as summer solstice banishes clouds, extends daylight, sun dispersing ultraviolet radiation. Who caused this climate disaster? Look into the mirror, speak up, pay attention to heat waves, eliminate fossil fuels, switch to renewable energy, insulate your home, seal drafts, use LED light bulbs, reduce showers, drive a hybrid or electric vehicle, keep tires inflated, work together to reduce carbon footprints. You're wise enough to do this. And the last poem is entitled Competition. I must tell you that I have never competed with others. I've tried very hard just to say, okay, this is what grade I made, and that's it. So I decided to write a poem about competition. Every day you're drugged by the wolf of competition. Answer the phone. He asks how often you've won. You feed the beast a long list of publications. Feed him accolades, ribbons, erudition. He pushes you to the ground, smothers you in mud. You're drugged by the wolf of competition. One up the snarly beast, add superstition to the game. Push him under a ladder. Nearly done. Now feed the beast a pile of repetition. Twirl him 7 times clockwise until the rush of adrenaline's as seductive as a home run. His senses dulled, ignore the wolf of competition. Wallowing in pride, he's still there in the underbrush. Your craving revs up like an unforgiving desert sun. Don't feed the beast. Disable him with rejection. Outwit the howling fiend with eviction. Toss him asunder. Don't be undone or duped by the wolf of competition. Rein him in with an uncanny lack of ambition. I remember my father telling me when I was young, you can only be as good as you can be. So just focus on competing with yourself and being better the next day. And my mother, who was my teacher in 5th and 6th grade, endorsed that. Oh, thank you so much. And thank you again to all of you who are here today or tonight.